Hi, welcome to Politics and Prose. My name is Danielle, and I am an event staffer here, where we now host in-person and virtual events, along with trips and classes. You can find out more about all of this over on our website, www.politics-prose.com. Before we get started, I'd like to do some housekeeping. First, please keep your cell phones and other devices silent to avoid disrupting this event. Second, when we get to the time for opening the floor to your questions, please speak into the microphone that is on your right. It's over here, so that everyone can hear your question. We are recording, and if you kind of yell it from your seat, it won't get caught on the recording, okay? Following the Q&A, we'll have a signing up here at this table, so if you've not already bought the book, we've many copies behind our registers, which are at the front of the store. We will ask you to line up starting here at this pillar by the microphone, and we'll come by to ask your name for personalization. And we will probably ask you to spell that too so that we don't write it wrong. We want your books to be correct. Once the event is complete, we kindly ask that you please fold up your chairs and lean them against something sturdy. That helps us to clean up a little bit faster. So now, without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Sujata Massey to discuss her new book, the fourth installment in her best-selling Perveen Mystery series, The Mistress of Bhatia House. Sujata Massey was born in England to parents from India and Germany. She grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and lives in Baltimore, Maryland. She was a features reporter for the Baltimore Evening Sun before becoming a full-time novelist. The first Perveen Mystery novel, The Widows of Malabar Hill, was an international bestseller and won the Agatha Christie and Mary Higgins Clark Awards. Massey will be in conversation with Lou Bayard, whom the New York Times praised for reinvigorating historical fiction and rendering the past as if he'd witnessed it firsthand. His acclaimed novels include The Pale Blue Eye, which was adapted into a global #1 Netflix release, the national bestseller, Courting Mr. Lincoln, Roosevelt's Beast, The School of Night, The Black Tower, and Mr. Timothy. And these, along with his many other works, have been translated into over a dozen languages. His reviews and articles have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and Salon. Currently, Bayard is an instructor at George Washington University and is the chair of the Penn-Faulkner Awards. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Sujata Massey and Lou Bayard to Politics and Prose.
Lou, I don't know if you're amazed as I am. Maybe these are all your people.
Yes, I know every single person in this room. They're all here because of me and not you.
Yeah, wow. Oh my gosh, people over here too. Thank you so much for coming.
It's great to see everybody. It's great to see everybody tonight on this unexpectedly pleasant summer day in DC.
Well, it's not bad. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it over what they've got in California or India right now, right?
Yeah,
it's the rainy season, so it's hard there too.
There we go. So do you want to start with the reading, or do we want to just?
It's a little. I don't usually do this, but I just get the feeling that people here know Perveen, and they might want to hear a little bit. So I'm going to just start with something that's pretty close to the beginning. So if you get a book tonight, you'll probably get to this point.
No spoilers.
It's not a spoiler. Anyway, Perveen's sister-in-law, Gulnaz, is involved with a women's charity group. She can't make it to a party, so she sends Perveen in her stead. And so this is a little bit of what it looks like to be at a fundraising tea party in the neighborhood of Ghatkopar, which is a predominantly Gujarati Hindu neighborhood. In those days, it was a village, and it was outside of Bombay. So I'll try to get off the chair and get over there. Okay.
Dignity, always dignity. Yes.
Okay. Perveen felt that getting past Mangala Bhatia had been like running the proverbial gauntlet. No matter what she said, it seemed to peeve the woman. But she'd made it into a beautiful stone courtyard half filled with ladies dressed in pastel-colored summer saris. Many were in shades of pink, quite pretty but confusing as she started her search for Bhatia. And soon it would be too late to catch the hostess, as everyone would be sitting down for their presentation. Thin mattresses had been spread across the ground for seating, and in front of them stood short-footed wooden trays. Each tray held a banana leaf platter, a copper tumbler for water, and a shockingly simple clay teacup. Western-style porcelain, silver, and furniture were in high use amongst Bombay society, so Perveen found this departure an unexpected and very charming setup. Perveen scanned the courtyard. She'd never been in Ghodkopur before, and she guessed that many of the guests were local. The charitable hospital Uma was founding would be built inside Bombay, so Perveen had expected to see some familiar faces. Yet the only woman she recognized was Lady Gwendolyn Hobson-Jones, the prickly mother of Perveen's best friend Alice. Lady Hobson-Jones turned from chatting with one friend to the next, and her cool blue gaze swept the crowd. Perveen smiled and began walking toward her, but Lady Hobson-Jones did not return the greeting. Instead, the doyenne of British Bombay took the arm of the full-figured brunette next to her and motioned for a third woman, this one a slender blonde in her 30s, to step closer. Now all three ladies' backs were toward Perveen. Perveen stood still, wondering if Lady Hobson-Jones had snubbed her. Was this what the British called cutting someone dead? Perveen could never admit to being fond of Alice's mother, but they'd always chatted and smiled their way through encounters. Irritation rising, Perveen walked in the opposite direction, resolved that she would complete the mission of locating Bhatia. Amid the numerous women wearing pinks that ranged from the palest blush to brilliant fuchsia, Perveen finally settled on someone who seemed likely to be the chair. She appeared to be in her mid-20s and wore an expensive-looking rose silk crepe floral sari. Hanging from her nose was a black and gold beaded wedding necklace with a floral pendant made up of many small diamonds. Striving to appear casual, Perveen approached the woman and her social group, who were gathered around a tall woman in a blue and white flowered silk sari. This lady, who had a striking, strong-boned face, wore her hair tightly coiled in a bun. Instead of carrying a cloth purse, she nestled a large leather bag under her left arm. "We must make the hospital welcoming to all," the tall woman was saying in fluent Marathi. "Even the hospital sentries could be women. Of course, we'll have female nurses, but we need more women physicians. I'll do my best to recruit, but I hope that you'll encourage your daughters to enroll in medical college." The woman in pink glanced at the others, then spoke in a decorous tone. "Dr. Penker, we admire you for receiving your advanced and useful education, but medical college is too expensive for most of us." Hearing the surname, Perveen realized the tall woman had to be Dr. Miriam Penker, the city's only female obstetrician gynecologist. It seemed quite a coup for the fledgling hospital to have her on board. "The girls can study in India," the doctor gave her a wide smile. "We're fortunate that the Lady Harding Medical College is opened in Delhi. One of our committee members at the gathering, Mrs. Serena Prescott, was even involved in their fundraising. She can help your daughters." Skeptical glances flickered between a few women, as if they didn't believe an Englishwoman would assist them, or that they could send a daughter as far away as Delhi.
Right. So we are plunged in. We are plunged into this world. Now, it sounds like you say, like most people have been following Perveen through her journey from the start. I will say Perveen Mystery is a name that suggests she needs to become a detective. That last name alone just suggests mystery is her future.
It's supposed to work on your subconscious.
There, I dragged it.
Mystery is a word that actually means construction, and there are a lot of people in India have surnames that are connected with their work or connected with their hometown. Yeah. And when I learned that this was a very common surname in the Parsi community, the Indian Zoroastrian community, I said, oh my gosh, how could I not have her be Miss Mystery?
So for those of people who are coming to her for the first time, she has some really fascinating historical antecedents, these two pioneering women from Bombay? Or?
Right. So you just heard about, well, first I'll tell you, Perveen I list her as Bombay's only woman lawyer, but there was an earlier woman lawyer, Cornelia Sarabji, who began practicing in the late 1880s, and she was ethnically Parsi and probably half tribal, and the couple, her parents, became Christians, so she was Christian and Parsi at the same time, which is something I can completely understand, being Indian and German. So she was just, so I feel
What do you
a
do about the
kinship.
holidays? What do you?
Oh,
do
they're
with-
the
yeah.
best. The holidays are the best because you have chicken curry and then you have a cake with whipped cream. So it's a good situation. And in fact, there's a lot of cake in this book. And I
yeah.
worked in a Black
Yeah.
Forest cherry
Yes.
cake, which is my mother's specialty. Like she makes it from scratch still, and she's in her 80s, and it's an incredible cake. So there, Cornelia Sarabji was a big influence, and she very astutely, wrote these memoirs, and she also had her letters were published by her son, who's a professor of history at Oxford, and so that they have it's a wonderful treasure trove of information that you can get on her. And then the other person that I tapped into was the first Indian woman OBGYN in India. Her name is Jerusha Jarad, and she is from the Bene Israel Jewish community of Bombay. So it's pretty interesting, right? And it was true. And so that's why I have Miriam Penker being a Jewish Indian doctor. And so Perveen, in this book, she'll go and she'll visit the quarter where she lived, the neighborhood, and she'll go past the synagogue, which still exists, and she'll learn about how that neighborhood was and what the lifestyle was like. So it's really fun for me. Don't you feel, as somebody who writes historicals, that you hit gold when you find somebody that is inspiring like that or about a place?
Well, an outlier of sorts, if that's what you mean. But I would say I am overwhelmed by the complexity of your fictional universe, which is 1920s Bombay. You have so many different layers of authority or powerlessness, depending on what you're looking at. So you have the different religions. You have Christianity. You have Hindu. You have Muslim. You have Jewish. You have of course, the gender issues, which we will talk about. This is very much a story about gender. But you also have, on the top of it, the Raj, the British occupational forces who've been there for centuries. So many different layers. How do you navigate that? I would find it just overwhelming at some level.
Well, I guess you could say that there's a lot of power over Perveen, but there are a lot of paths to navigate, which are interesting because there are a lot of people that don't necessarily want the power that's there, but they might or might not have a good relationship and with each other. And one thing that was a really good benefit for the Parsis is not being Hindu or Muslim or Christian. They were not a hot button community usually, that people felt like, oh, I can get along with them. They're not against me. They're very fair. They've learned a lot. There are a lot of them are lawyers. So they had this sort of like sometimes unfair stereotype of like being these perfect people sometimes. Yeah. Even the British liked them. So, so for me to have a character like that, she has more privilege than other people. Yeah. Though at times she can feel very out of it, but she really does have more chances to do things, and she can make friends with more people. And she also had that benefit of leaving India for a little while to have an outside education and then come back and look at her community with a fresh eye. And also all the freedom fighting was going on in Britain too, and the suffragette movement was there.
Yeah, talking about freedom fighting, one of the names that pops up, it's actually startling every time it happens, is Mahatma Gandhi, who when this is taking place is in jail.
Yeah, and if anybody who read the book right before the Bombay Prince, when there were riots that followed the visit of Edward VIII to India that fall, and it was blamed on Gandhi. So that was the government really cracked down, and they accused him of sedition, and they jailed him. So that was the outcome after that. And I can't remember whether I mentioned that or not in that book, but I definitely mentioned it in this book that he's there.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And yeah, he's kind of I feel like he's looming over this. Maybe a future volume. Will he emerge?
Well, I can't do it. I mean, he's too important a person to put words in his mouth, and I think that too many people would be offended. And I mean, I even am friends with someone who works at, the institute in his memory, and I can get a lot of good information from her. But I think for me to impersonate, or to try to give him words or an idea, I don't want to do it. But this is something that you
I
do
it all
very
the time.
well. You do it. So tell me how.
I am deeply promiscuous about this. I just put words all the time. For me, the key is to treat them as a fictional character, just like everybody else. And once I do that, then they have the same autonomy as a fictional character, and they can say whatever I need them to say, or whatever makes sense for them to say. And I don't have an issue with that. I should perhaps.
No,
I have no ethics.
I don't
whatsoever.
have an issue, but I mean, I think I could fear violence. I don't know if anyone's going to be violent about Mr. Lincoln.
Yeah.
Well, or the Kennedys.
Yeah.
Or Jackie.
Yeah. Who knows?
There's
always a chance. There's always a chance, but that's interesting. Yeah, the question of how do you do with real people, and how do you in a fictional universe. Yeah. But you also have so many, just the fictional people alone in your universe. The list of characters would probably run 2 or 3 pages. There's so many characters, and that's true of every household has multiple servants. Yeah. It's a very crowded universe that you're, and I want to know how you navigate it.
Well, it's really challenging, and I mean, I think the thing for a writer that it can be a temptation for me, and it can be a temptation for anybody, is you invent a person to solve a problem, and you invent another person to solve another problem. Or, in my case, it would be, well, Perveen's not cooking for herself, so somebody's bringing her food. She's not driving herself, someone else is driving her. There's always somebody else in the room. So that makes it really challenging for me. And then, like at this party, how do you zoom in on one woman when there are all these other women around? That was a challenging thing to try to do that, to zoom in on that woman, to zoom in on Dr. Penker. That was super challenging. The sister-in-law Mongol, I mentioned her at the beginning. Oh, and then there's servants. Oh, and there's a whole bunch of children. Bhatia has something like 4 children, and then one of them is going to catch Perveen's eye. But how does she just notice that child only?
And then you have the ayahs, who are the
Asian.
A word I first learned through New York Times crossword puzzles, right? It's the Asian nanny, always going straight to ayah.
Yeah.
But it turns out to be a pretty central job in this story, because they are...
they're caregivers. And an ayah can also take care of a grown woman. Like, for example, Perveen and her mom share the help of a woman at their house who is their ayah, Gita. And though I don't use that word ayah for her a lot, because it just seems to me like it confuses my mind. Like, I like to think about it for children, but they are also called ayahs.
So yes, lots of children in jeopardy, lots of people in jeopardy. How do you... Okay, in terms of keeping track of the names, I asked you earlier, do you have like this beautiful mind kind of office where you have like pictures and arrows pointing everywhere? How do you organize this complicated world?
Well, I have tried to do that, and sometimes there's usually a point in the middle of a book where I get very confused, and I would start to work with those index cards, but now I'm using a program called Scrivener.
Please explain.
Have you heard of that? Yeah. Okay, yeah, there's some writers in the room. So it's sort of like as if you had something like Word, like when you open up Word and you see there's this blank area to write. Well, with Scrivener, they have, you have access to 2 other screens which you can minimize, but they run like columns. So I have a column with the character names, and then if I click on it, I can see their age. If I put their hair color, if I put their job, I can see that. And then there's another area where you can have your scenes, and your synopsis. And then there are places for research notes. So theoretically, you can just be bringing in stuff from the internet and putting it in your research note and looking at it. But I'm not a person who that's where I default to paper. So I don't have a lot of research on it, but that's how I do it.
And worst comes to worst, there's a copy editor to come along.
There's many editors.
To say, wait a minute.
I had 4 editors involved with this book. So hopefully, I had 4 editors.
So if there's anything wrong, it's their fault, not yours.
No, well, it's just everybody catches something later. It's really amazing. And another way that I do my work is I try to connect with people from the community I'm writing about. For example, because I'm writing about the Gujarati community, I sent my manuscript to 4, Gujarati origin women to get their take on it and make sure I had the correct words for, eldest brother's wife, and, a spell I was describing the dessert correctly and things like that. And believe it or not, they all found different things. So, there's no one authority on it and I just took it all. I was like, well, this person really has an eye for clothing, or this person has an eye for food. This person has an eye for the language of, family relationships. But they're really important.
And you don't want to deprive some future reader of the chance to come back at you and say, Sujata, you got completely wrong. You said the wrong word, and they're going to send you some email, and they'll feel so much better for having corrected you.
Yeah, what do you do when you set a book in Britain? Because I know you've written a few books in Britain.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know that I have a British reader. I need more. I need more readers, because I trust my ear, and that's not always infallible.
Do you know Katrina McPherson?
No, but I need.
Okay,
it sounds like I
so
need to.
She's a wonderful Scottish writer. She's in the mystery community. My friend Laurie Rader Day wrote an incredible book, Death
Agatha
at
Christie.
Greenaway. Agatha. It's a mystery set at Agatha Christie's country house. Some people have read it, and Katrina read it to make sure that the British English was really on the mark. And it was so good.
Yeah.
So.
We all have our.
Yeah.
We all need the help we get. I have a friend who works at the Library of Congress, and she's just retired, but I call her my research angel, because I'll say, what would Hyde Park have looked like in the 1920s, and she'll find some article or something like that. And I have a woman named Alden O'Brien who works at the DAR who helps me with clothes. I'm big about clothes.
Yeah, me too.
I love the clothes, because I think they convey so much about status and social status. So we all there's lots of help out there, I guess is the message here.
There is, and it's like often readers will actually reach out to me. For example, the genesis of this book, I would say, there was a fan who wanted to meet me, and I was in Boston. That was where she lived, and she was a graduate student. And she said, do you know about all the issues about contraception and abortion in India during colonial rule? Because it's really interesting, and it was terrible what women went through. And I was like, Perveen, I just figured, well, there isn't anything there, but, there's so much else going on. But you know what? Women's lives are central to everybody's lives, right? To the whole society, because more than half the babies in Bombay were dying within a year of their birth, because the conditions, the sanitation, the disease, the malnutrition, and a huge amount of women were dying. They were outpacing the deaths of males from the time they were 11 to 35. Why is that? Because they are having babies.
Too so young.
They're having them too young. And something
old,
that Jerusha Gerard, that first woman doctor, that OBGYN that I mentioned, found out was, she said, these women that are being kept in seclusion in these dark houses, like, for example, Widows of Malabar Hill, women in Parda, their bones are soft because they didn't have sun, and that for them, for somebody like that to be 12 years old and having a baby with soft bones that has never exercised I mean, they're going to have a very complicated delivery. So, there's all kinds of things that, the way the society was set up, it was not set up to have healthy childbearing.
Margaret Sanger is another name that pops up in this book to good effect. And it also affects Perveen's romantic choices. She has this kind of taboo romance with a hot guy named Colin.
He appears in the book. I always get that
yes,
question.
Yes, he is there. He is there. But one of the reasons that their union is fraught is she doesn't want to get pregnant.
Well, I mean, and also, I think Colin would really like to marry her. And let's just say that up front. He's not any kind of
he's not a player.
Pad or anything like that. But it's just, it's an impossible. It's like you would ruin. Everything would be lost if you became pregnant. And those marriages between British and Indian, they were more likely to happen at, if it was a class that nobody cared about, like if it was, say, working class, perhaps a military marriage or something like that. But in the upper classes, the only place it happened was with the Parsis. So that makes it more likely for Perveen to have a romance. But when I say that there were sometimes cross-cultural marriages with Parsis, it was Parsi men who were fabulously wealthy, and they would say, meet a beautiful French woman or somebody like that. They loved France. So it would be a union like that, and then the family would be cast out of society. They would not be allowed to go to the fire temple to worship. And their families were told, if you socialize with them on the sly, we're going to cut you dead too. So it was a really difficult situation.
It's funny, I'm just realizing now that your book is set around the time. Does anyone remember the name Merle Oberon? She was an actress back in the day. A fascinating story, half Indian.
Whoa, I didn't know.
Half Indian who tried to conceal that, pretended that she grew up in Tasmania. Actually took, was it mercury to bleach her skin? And it was and I think
what?
she
I'm interested in Merle Oberon too. And did you ever hear that she had a dark elderly maidservant who followed her everywhere? Her mother. Yeah. So it's a super sad story.
Yeah. Although toward the end of her life, she actually let her natural skin color come out.
And I think she's Anglo-Indian.
Anglo-Indian, yes. But she and beautiful, stunning woman. But just the sad, again, the caste issues that come out for even glamorous movie stars in these days.
Yeah, it's just there was a lot of racism, and racism isn't gone.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Then that leads me to ask. I mean, this is set in the 1920s. Are there issues that come up or themes that come up in the book that you think are just as relevant or just as fraught today?
Yeah, well, I started working on this book around 2017, and by the time that the book was being edited in the United States, like, abortion was no longer the law of the land. So it was a situation like what I'm talking about in the 1920s Bombay is that there was no legal abortion, and in fact there were laws against it, and the same thing, contraception was something obscene. Doctors were not allowed to talk to their patients about what they could do if they didn't want to get pregnant. However, abstinence, they certainly talked about abstinence, and that was actually Mahatma Gandhi's idea. Right. And he and Margaret Sanger talked about it, and they did not agree on it because she said it was unrealistic, and he said, but it's the right thing to do. So anyway, I just found that our landscape was looking more like the 1920s, by the time the book was actually, being edited.
You obviously have a lot of Indian readers.
I'm very popular. I'm a bestseller in Italy.
Italy too?
Yes, that's my favorite.
Well, let's parse it out. What do you hear from the Indian readers and
the Italians,
and the Italian readers, for that matter?
Oh gosh, you know what? I think the Italian reader, the European reader response that I get, and it could be that it's because there's a language barrier. It's just they're interested in the country, and they're interested in the country. but for the Indian readers, and I have a lot of Indian readers, I have a publisher there, it's looking at a young woman trying to make her own way. And those issues are still feel like part of women's lives. A lot of women are living at home with their parents until they get married. There's still, a question of whether you're going to have your own marriage or your parents are going to set it up for you. More likely, your parents are going to set it up. And there still are some taboos around, menstruation and things in the workplace. So people can relate to it. So I really have a lot of young readers in India, actually. And when I say young, I mean women in their 20s and 30s, and I hear from a lot. Whereas I feel like in the United States, it's more like basically more people have time to read after they're 40. I mean, let's face it, that there's some really busy years.
The kids are a little older, yeah.
Or if you're training, like you're in graduate school or your work, it's just young children.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying people under 40 shouldn't read our books. Just saying that, it's I get more. I feel like it's a super young audience in India.
My kids don't actually read books, so
hey, my son doesn't either. So
that's right. Although my older one is actually trying to write a book, and I gently suggested you might want to read, but one before writing it. It's just a thought. It's just
I love it.
Putting that out there as a suggestion.
Yeah.
Yes. But I've had college students too who just think they're going to become writers without becoming readers.
Yeah.
And it starts as a reader. What were your influences growing up? What were the books you loved most?
Oh, that's a nice question. Well, my parents had, we had a house in Minnesota. I grew up in a professor's house, and my parents had met in England. So they had all these British edition Agatha Christie's running across the top shelf, and no one said you can't read those books. So I started reading those, and my dad noticed it, and then the next thing was he gave me Wilkie Collins' The Moonstone.
I love that book.
Yeah. But then also we traveled to India, and we got interested in these books that other Indian kids were reading, which were these crazy British children's mysteries by Enid Blyton. Everybody, there's going to be people that know the Enid Blyton. So there's something like, my books are not very violent. They're about like teams and friends solving things, and so I think that those things are important. So those were some big influences on me when I was young, and of course I read Nancy Drew. But I really did enjoy Agatha Christie and Enid Blyton.
I loved Agatha Christie.
Yeah. What about you? What were you reading?
Well, Agatha was definitely one of them. The ending of The Pale Blue Eye was influenced by Agatha Christie. It's the same ending as the Murder of Roger Ackroyd.
It's a beautiful ending.
Thank you. Yeah. So people said, "Oh, where'd that twist come from?" Agatha. It came from Agatha. So as so many things did, she was an amazing. I've never thought she was a brilliant writer so much as a brilliant plotter and a brilliant understander of how people read and the assumptions they make, so that she can then subvert those assumptions.
Yeah.
And
What's funny about Agatha Christie is I don't actually remember the plots of the books, even though we say that they're really good. I don't remember them.
Gosh.
Like you were saying that. Because it's just like such a pleasure. You just go through this experience. It's like a meal.
Yes, comfort is.
It's like, and maybe I'm bad to say that or it's my mind or something.
I think we all retain different things. I was going to ask, the last time we were here, last year, sometime, was for a Noir at the Bar event.
Yeah, with our good friends.
Our good
Chris
friends.
is here.
Ed Amar was hosting it, Angie Kim, and folks, and I'm blanking on...
Cheryl Head.
Thank you. So, what do you get out of the mystery writer community? What does it do?
I actually moved back to this area for the mystery community. Like I live in Baltimore, and I was a member of Sisters in Crime, which is a great organization. Anyone can join it, but the founding idea of Sisters in Crime was to promote women's mystery novels, because we were getting very few reviews until the 1980s. So I loved that organization. I was also a member. I don't know that we had MWA until recently here. I don't know that we had a chapter. I feel like I was a national
Do you
member.
know how long that, Chris, it's been around? It's been a while, actually, yeah. I think, yeah. At least, 20, at least 20 years.
MWA is old. Okay, so
Yeah.
I just don't
Yeah.
remember what. Oh, it's 20 years. Well, listen, I started before 20
Oh, there we go.
years.
At least maybe, yeah.
So I was
yeah.
here before there
Yeah.
was a chapter. So I missed that conviviality. I missed how often we saw each other. I missed how many of us there were. And one of the things that I truly love about the mystery writing community is a lot of times when someone has an invitation to a library, they'll say to the librarian, well, why don't you bring so-and-so? Can we bring so-and-so also? And this other person, I think it would be great to make it a panel. And it's always better when there's more than just one. It's hard to talk all by yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
So I
Absolutely.
love that, so that's what it means to me. What about you?
Well, I don't know. I love mystery writers because they're actually the nicest people in the world, which is strange because they spend their days like plotting death on the page, right? And visiting horror on people. Same with horror writers, by the way, thriller writers. They tend to be the nicest people in the world. My pat explanation is they get it all out on the page. Whatever violent tendencies they have are just disgorged.
Yeah.
And then they become the nice, kind people that you and I are right now.
Now, what about the historical writer that is writing, the classic, high-quality, modern, historic novel that you're writing a lot of the time? Like a Jackie and me.
Yeah.
What are their personalities
I
like?
don't know. They're geeks. They're geeks. They're people who want to sit in like the reading room of the Library of Congress, which is one of my second homes, and just gaze into some dusty tome that nobody else has opened in 80 years, and get thrilled by that. To me, I don't write thrillers anymore, but the thrill is still there in the history, and finding something that hasn't been discussed or written about.
That hasn't been discussed. That's the key.
Yeah. So I think that's what you found with Perveen.
Yeah.
You found this window into a world that so many of us knew nothing about. I know I didn't. So.
Well, let's hope it's this world. There's so many options with it. You could look at a society in so many different ways. Do I want to write about childbearing? Do I want to write about the movies? Do I want to write about do I want to write about another location in India? But you know what? I'm looking at the time. I wonder if we should move
We got
to
time
questions.
for one more question. We got one more question, then we'll
I'm ready
invite people to come up. She wants to get rid of me, I can tell. No, so how often do you get back to India?
Well, I'm going this October, and I
Nice.
haven't been since the pandemic. I was in the early 2020. I was there, and I was reading the papers, and I bought masks in Gotkoper. I was staying in Gotkoper, the exact place where you're going to read about with my cousin. And she took me to the pharmacist, and he looked at me like I was crazy. Why does this woman want these masks? And I bought extra masks because my parents were going to travel after me, and they were scoffing and scoffing. And then they used the masks, and then I think they gave an extra mask to the people that were living there because by then nobody had masks anymore. Yeah. So I travel back with like a really fabulous mask. So I'm proud of that. I'll be wearing my mask when I go back too.
Can I just ask too, as people feel free to gather, to come forward. What's the next, Praveen? What do we got? Can you reveal? What can you reveal?
Well, I'm writing it slowly, and it's going to be about the emerging motion picture world.
There we go.
So
this is the origins of Bollywood?
Yes. Before they didn't call it Bollywood yet, but
yeah.
you know that. Anyway, that's what I'm doing. What about you? What can you reveal to us?
I cannot reveal anything. I'm legally enjoined from speaking
Okay.
of the next project. Yeah. So, but it involves London. In fact, I want to ask. I'll ask you privately because one of the characters is a Rani, but it's the white kind. There were white Rajas back in the day. This is the White Raja of Sarawak. And his wife was this formidable woman who basically dumped her husband after a few years and traveled the world. But she was always called the Rani. But it brings up this image that is, we always just think a Rani or a Raja is somebody Indian born. But in fact, back in the day, it was just the white ruling class who just kind of.
I
live
have
these
to.
things.
It's like I'm totally flabbergasted.
Yeah.
This is the first I'm
Yeah.
hearing about
Yeah.
it.
So-
but I don't doubt you that
Yeah,
you
no,
found
and
that little
we
corner.
Found, there's a white Raja. There's a white
You
Raja
found
somewhere.
it.
But yeah, anyway. But that's neither here nor
Okay.
there. Anyone want to come forward with questions?
There's a spot
Okay.
over there.
Oh gosh, sorry. We put it just in your way, just to make it harder for you. Here we go.
This is just a simple question. Have you read Isabel Wilkerson's Caste?
Oh, I have a copy of Cast, but I haven't read it yet.
Okay, then I
Oh,
wanted
can't
to
ask
know
me a
what you
question.
thought, whether
Yeah.
it really.
I've heard it's
caste-
wonderful, though.
But she does
Really good.
describe the racism in this country as a caste system.
I read it. I read that book, and it's a fascinating. I find it eye-opening to look at.
What did you think?
To look at the racism as a caste system, I
Yeah.
thought was really like a game changer for me,
Yeah.
because it really is. Because race is some kind of a fiction that we talk about, that we tell about ourselves. But
Right.
caste is just about keeping people down and in their place. Yeah.
Right. Just wanted. I've not read your books. I came because all my friends were so excited about your coming. So now I'm going to start reading.
You have
you
good
got to.
friends.
You got to
You
now.
have good friends. You can start with the first one if you like, The Widows of Malabar Hill.
I intend to.
Okay. Hello.
During the pandemic and Uttar Pradesh, they handed out ivermectin, and that got rid of the coronavirus within about 3 weeks. What happened in Bombay?
Oh, there were a lot of things people were trying, including herbal remedies, but they did wind up developing their own vaccine in India. And of course, it's a place where lots and lots of drugs are made. So, a lot of people did get vaccinated, but it was quite tricky to do it because there were people who didn't trust the vaccine, and there were some unscrupulous people that would charge for the vaccine or say you had to pay a fee. So what I heard about happening was people that I knew about in the elite were all able to get the vaccine pretty early, but it didn't go through the whole system, though it was available and it was free. But there were people. It's taken a lot of time for people to want to take a vaccine.
Mm-hmm. And what was your personal choice decision on that regard?
I vaccinated myself.
I was going to say that dynamic plays out in your book because there's early on there's a fire, which two people are injured. One is the little princeling, and one is the ayah, and the ayah does not get the medical treatment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. Yeah, somebody's injured. The doctor said they both should use this cream, but the family decides to give the cream to the little boy and not to the ayah. And the ayah goes with what is from the a woman who works in the household, who does all the remedies. And that's how childbirth was for a lot of people, because if you're not going into a hospital.
Any other questions out there?
No. Okay, here
Oh,
comes
here we go.
somebody.
I was wondering why you decided to switch from present-day American Japan to historical mysteries.
Oh, great. You remember the earlier series. Yeah, oh. Yeah, Rashomon. So I wrote an earlier series, and the first one was 97, and the last one was probably around 2012, 13, something like that. So it's sort of like it goes into two things. One is I had publishing problems. Like I started out with a really strong support of HarperCollins, and then I wound
We both did
going,
HarperCollins at some point.
Yeah, and then I wound up going to smaller publishers. And the second part was I wasn't traveling to Japan as much as I used to when I was doing the early books, and which actually started when I lived there. So but I was really totally engrossed in India because I had become a mom and I was spending more time with my parents and thinking about, what do I want to share with my kids, and what did I miss having? And so I just sort of gradually got deeper and deeper. Yeah, so do you tell me what you were going about the publishing and how that
Oh,
can
I was just
throw
say
you a loop.
we've both been around a while.
Mm-hmm.
We're people of a certain age, and we both had the big publisher and the small publisher.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? Do you feel? Do you feel like a small publisher you get more love because there's fewer of you to go?
Oh,
send love
now,
to?
yeah, I have a small publisher now. I have Soho Press. I love being there. I feel like I know the publisher. I know everybody in the company, and I really like that a lot. That said, when you're in a smaller company, things may not be like on this super tight schedule like they are at HarperCollins. So I was super pressured with my deadlines when I was there. That's why I was producing those books, and that's why I couldn't make a change. I could not get off that train until they were tired of running the train. So, that's the difference. So that there's some really great things especially for the reader in terms of, regularly having a book come out, say, every June. And then for the writer, if you're working in the smaller setting where they're a little bit more flexible about your delivery, you can potentially embroider, massage your book, do something different. And I think that is very beneficial too.
I was going to ask, because I've never written a series, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm always want to ask a series writer, how do you keep it fresh? How do you stay interested? Because you're going back to at least the same basic small set of characters, the same kind of template. How do you keep it alive and fresh?
I wanted to explore more of these characters that you see shadowy in the wings. Perveen's brother Rustam and his wife Gulnaz, and so I just thought I'm going to dive deep into looking what is a typical marriage like, in this family, and what's the experience of privileged people that have a baby. What's that like, and does that make it easier? And with what they didn't know about women's health, would that even affect Gulnaz? So I think that if you look at something else like that, and then if all else fails, you can take your character out of town. I mean, you've probably seen that happen all the time, right? That that people are suddenly they're going to Texas, suddenly they're going to Hawaii. That writer is bored.
I remember the old days of Murder, She Wrote, right? And it's like they finally realized Cabot Cove has the highest homicide rate in all of America. So they sent her on the road finally.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, there's no one left to kill in
Yeah.
Cabot Cove. We have to send her somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
Anyway, I think Madame Kama was the one who created the Indian flag, orange, white, and green. And she was a Parsi. And as far as Isabel Wilkerson goes, I don't think she ever went to India. When Martin Luther King went to India, he said, "I'm coming here as a pilgrim, not as a tourist," which I think was a very profound statement.
Uh-huh.
And as far as the White Raja goes, I never heard of him.
So I wanted to mention, we had a whole lot of people were named, and Madame Kama was this incredible Parsi woman who is a freedom fighter, and the British couldn't put her in prison because she was an elite woman, so they had her deported to France. And so I've hinted that Perveen and Alice met her when they were students at Oxford, and they went over to France. So she's always in there, and also this Kama Hospital plays a role in my book too. A hospital that was founded by her family for maternal health. So you got another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about what inspired you to make the career change from writing for Baltimore Evening Sun to novelist full time.
Oh wow. Okay, are you a journalist?
I'm not.
Okay. Because oh gosh. Well, it was a move. I was getting married, and I couldn't stay in Baltimore anymore because my husband was a young naval officer, and I convinced him to try to get a posting in Japan because I looked at what the options were, and I wasn't willing to like leave my wonderful newspaper writing job to go to another town in the United States. Like, I just thought it's got to be something really good. And so it wound up being near Yokohama, which was wonderful. So that's what happened, that we moved there, and I thought I would try to be a freelance writer because a lot of my friends were doing that. Well, not a lot, but I had a friend who had done the same thing. But I realized that I got sick on those trains. And I would be getting sick on the train.
Because they're so fast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'd be getting sick going there. I'd be getting sick going back. And then I might make $100 on my story. So I thought, well, I'm just going to sit back. I've got a government housing allowance. I don't have to pay the rent. And I'll just work on I'll try to write fiction. So that's what happened. It was just a lot of circumstances like that. And you have a journalism background.
I have my only master's is in journalism. Actually, much good it's done.
Your
me.
only master's. Well, I don't have any masters.
I don't have an MFA anything in creative writing.
No, I don't have an MFA either.
I was once disqualified from an academic job because I don't have an MFA in creative writing. It's like I'd written 9 novels by that point, but that was not salient.
Oh my gosh,
that was not relevant to the position.
I was just saying to you before this that I don't think you should have to have a degree to be a published novelist. It makes absolutely no sense. It's just a matter of how good your book is, and that somebody's willing to publish it.
That's the hope, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I've read the first 2 of your series, and one of the things I loved is when you describe the saris that the women are wearing, and you always draw attention to the color and the fabric that the sari is made out of. And I was just wondering, could you say something about the color in that society and why it's meaningful to you?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to admit, full disclosure, I don't wear saris. I find them really, I just get overwhelmed by them when I put them on. Though now I guess there are all these ones with hooks and things like that. So I come to it from an appreciator's point of view. And I guess what I would say about saris is that there are different colors for different stages of life. There are colors that are more suited for certain regions, like that there will be weavers that will develop a certain kind of style of weaving, say in Benares, or there will be in Maharashtra, there'll be a different style, and in Bengal, there'll be a different style. And today, if you're a woman in India, you might be purposely collecting saris from all these different places, but then you would pretty much be wearing a sari that your community wore. And in fact, one of the feedbacks I got from a journalist in India was that I wasn't getting the Parsi saris quite right. And they would always have this petty point border, and I would mention that they would have this embroidered border that had been added on, but I just got kind of bored with them. So then he said, I'll help you with them. So he was really my fashion stylist. And there's a ball scene, there's a ballroom experience at the end of the book. And so he basically dressed Perveen.
Nice. For free.
Yeah,
for free.
He was for free.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned to you earlier that I was listening to an interview with a Malaysian writer who said that he was asked why he didn't explain for Western readers what laksa was. For those who haven't, laksa is the delicious noodle soup that's just exquisite. Anyway, he said, well, a French writer doesn't explain what a croissant is. He just trusts that people either know it or can figure it out. He certainly doesn't put it in italics. How much do you feel you need to explain India to the Western reader, to the American reader?
Do you know I have a glossary?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, no, I don't know.
I do. There should. There is a. You all will have a glossary. Whether you, obviously in India they take the glossary out, but there are people that are. I would rather have the option that I don't want people to feel that the book is not welcoming to them. And I hear what they're saying about the croissant, but the word "sorry" is in common language, and so is croissant.
Yeah.
but something like laksa is not, or to say a Mongol sutra, like the wedding necklace, and I actually said wedding necklace. So sometimes I think about, do I really want to use the word Mongol sutra, or do I want to say wedding necklace? Or marriage necklace.
What do you guys think? Which way do we go? Marriage necklace? Yeah.
Yeah, it's there. So there you will find, but there's probably there might be 40 to 50 words already in the glossary. Yeah. So I'm judicious about it, and also I try to put real people in the glossary, like explain that they're a real person. Just so you know, because sometimes you'd see a word you don't know. Is that a person's name? Is it a place? And that could be my experience. Actually, if I were reading a French book, like I didn't study French, and there's certain, I would say I have that layperson's knowledge of French words that you see in English a lot, but I don't have really deep French. I don't have really, and I've studied German, but I don't have really, really deep German. Like I would have to go to the dictionary if it was if it was a word that was 20 letters long, I would have to go. Yeah.
Well, there are English. I get slagged all the time for vocabulary stuff, for English words that people don't know, for people that people don't know, and I don't know how to ally that, because I love learning new words.
Yeah.
So I'm always happy to see a word I don't know.
Also, when people are looking for a historical novel,
Yeah.
they want to have a feeling of the language of the period, and I think that really successful historical writers can make the book seem like it was written a long time ago. There's a writer, Nev March, who wrote a book called Murder in Old Bombay. I see some people have read her book. I think she's really, really gifted at making that book sound like the whole thing was written a long time ago. Yeah. You don't have to do that. Hilary Mantel doesn't do that.
She's amazing. I miss her so much. Yeah, we'll follow. She's up there in my echelon. We have time for one more question. If anybody has.
I just want to say that my grandmother died of lack of blood transfusion when she was pregnant. And my aunt, she died because the baby died in the womb and they never discovered it.
Yeah.
So those are two close people who died for no reason at all.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. She was talking about a family member who died with a transfusion that went wrong, and one with a childbirth. So that's exactly what what these women are concerned about. And and it's sad to hear that it was still so recent that this happened.
This was in the 1920s.
Oh, 1920s. Oh, you know what? She said this was in the 1920s, and I checked in my own family, and there were so many mothers who died. Like my grandmother didn't know that her mother was not her birth mother because they had just said the stepmother was. And then in my stepfather's family, there were 3 wives in succession because the first 2 died, and they blamed it on astrology. Baddest astrological sign that the husband's sign was too strong. So that was why the women died, not just that it was this, the childbirth issues. So a lot of people are forgotten. A lot of those ladies are forgotten, unfortunately.
What about the violence about women in India right now in the flow class? I mean, there's so much written about.
Well, it seems like there's a surge. Yeah, there's definitely been a surge in violence against women, for sure.
Not just in India, but
Yeah.
but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Will Perveen actually become a real lawyer?
Well, she is a real lawyer, but you mean a barrister? Well, there's an option for that to happen in 1923, and I haven't decided what to do about it.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I haven't decided because, honestly, the solicitors are considered more important. But, from our point of view and Perveen's, she should have the right to speak in court. Yeah.
And of course, it's fascinating that this is a completely British system. The barrister, the solicitor, that comes straight from Britain. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that influenced us the most was the British system of the sons, the eldest son,
Oh,
getting the property.
the primogeniture.
My
Yeah.
mother happened to be of the 3 daughters, so we did not get a cent.
Yeah.
All the sons got everything.
Yeah, and that stuff is still playing out. She was talking about the system where the men and the boys inherit and the girls don't. The girls are supposed to get married and be absorbed by these other families.
The dowry system. Yeah.
No, there's no dowry.
I know.
That was
That was the only compensation. I think
Okay.
it's time. Is
yeah.
it time?
We'll start our. Thank you so much for
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you for
all.
coming.
That was wonderful.